Before we get into the 1974 season, I think it's only appropriate that we jump to the end first. When the official team yearbook film was produced at the end of the season, it included a poem adapted from Mary Jane Carr's Pirate Wind, written by former NFL Films president Steve Sable and blended with the narration of John Facenda and the music of Sam Spence. The Autumn Wind has often been dubbed the battle hymn of the Raider Nation. Legend has it that when Raider owner and managing general partner Al Davis heard it for the first time, he remained silent for a short time before telling then NFL Films president Ed Sable that he loved it and that it epitomized everything that the Raiders stood for. The autumn wind is a pirate, blustering in from sea, with a rollicking song he sweeps along, swaggering boisterously. His face is weather-beaten. He wears a hooded sash, with a silver hat about his head and a bristling black mustache. He growls as he storms the country, a villain big and bold, and the trees all shake and quiver and quake as he robs them of their gold. The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. I am T3 Raider Facts, and I want to welcome you to the year 1974 and the famed history of the Oakland Raiders. As we continue on with the Raider Roots podcast, this is episode 20. At the start of the 1974 season, the Raiders were determined to not just make it to the AFC Championship game in 1974, but to kick in the door and make it all the way to the Super Bowl. Coming off a 9-4-1 season, this Oakland team had what many would consider to be one of the best teams in its entire franchise history. Tackle Henry Lawrence, future Hall of Fame tight end Dave Casper, running back Mark Van Egan, wide receiver Morris Bradshaw, all four of these young men were recruited, scouted, and vetted by Mr. Al Davis, and they all came in via the 1974 draft to be a vital part of an already talented and loaded squad that now confidently rested the offense on the shoulders of cool and confident Kenny Stabler. In August, National Football League Players Association players went on strike from July 1st until August 10th over disputes involving player pensions and minimum pay levels for both rookies and veterans. The only game that was canceled was the annual College All-Star Game, and the preseason schedule consisted of rookies only. There was some bad blood between players and those who crossed the picket line, but many of the players thought that these issues of compensation had to finally be dealt with. The players had also had a short work stoppage back in 1970 when the NFL-AFL merger was completed. There were several rule changes before the season began as well. Perhaps the most significant was moving the goalposts back 10 yards to the back of the end zone. This was done to make it so not so many games would be decided by a field goal, making the attempt more challenging, but also to avoid player injury. Although it probably wasn't the deciding factor, it was noted that as the Washington Redskins had attempted to score a touchdown in Super Bowl VII against Miami in January of 1973, a pass from quarterback Billy Kilmer was actually blocked by the goalpost on a crossing route. Moving the goalpost back would prevent this from happening again in a big game. When the Raiders broke camp and were ready to begin the season, they were confident. They truly believed that this team was the one that would get over the hump and win a title for Oakland, which had now won 2 World Series titles in a row and was on its way to a 3rd consecutive championship in Major League Baseball. In the first week of the season, the team traveled to Buffalo for a Monday night contest. The Bills outgained the Raiders mostly on the ground and jumped out to an early 7-0 lead. The Raiders closed the gap, then pushed ahead 10-7 in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, the Raiders added another field goal to lead 13-7. But from there, the teams traded scores and leads, and Buffalo tallied last to win the game by a single point. And even though the Raiders left town with a record of 0-1, the team would lose only one more time for the rest of the regular season. In week 2, they returned home to play Kansas City, but the game was never really in doubt. The Raiders had 3 interceptions on the day, but they countered with 3 touchdown passes. Meanwhile, their own passing game carved up the Chiefs' secondary for the most part. They sacked the Kansas City quarterback 4 times, and the defense pitched a shutout. Kansas City's only score was on a 52-yard pass interception return for touchdown by Wilbur Young, but that was after the Raiders had already put up 20 points. Oakland cruised to a 27-7 victory and evened its record at 1-1. The third week of the season marked a return to Pittsburgh, the scene of the crime, the place of the infamous Immaculate Reception. The defense played superb. For the first time in 132 games, the Steelers were shut out, as the Raiders registered a 17-0 victory. Terry Bradshaw did not start the game for Pittsburgh. Instead, the Steelers went with young, athletic Joe Gilliam at the helm. He had been very effective for the first two games, but not so on this day. He was sacked twice and intercepted 3 times. Meanwhile, Bradshaw stewed on the bench. After being the top pick for the Steelers just 4 years earlier and having led them to the playoffs 2 years in a row, this was not what he envisioned. After the game, Terry Bradshaw came into the locker room and asked Al Davis if there was any way that Davis could trade for him and get him out of Pittsburgh. Davis, knowing that he already had his hands full with Stabler, LaMonica, and Blanda, told Bradshaw that he would instead put in a good word for Bradshaw to coach Chuck Noll, who was Al's friend and former coaching colleague. Upon the good word by Al, Bradshaw was reinserted as the starter for Pittsburgh, and the team's fortunes completely changed, resulting in 2 consecutive Super Bowl championships and a total of 4 before the decade was complete. Meanwhile, the Raiders moved on to their next opponent, traveling to Cleveland. Behind Otto, Upshaw, Shell, Beeler, and Vela, the Silver and Black dispatched the Browns, despite spotting them with a 10-point lead, first at 10-0, then at 17-7. The offense rolled up 445 yards, while the defense forced a total of 6 turnovers. The Raiders steamrolled to 40 points, while their opponents ended up with 24. Now, they would head back across country to San Diego. It was a very workmanlike performance. Each team turned the ball over once, and there were not a whole lot of spectacular plays. The defense basically ruled the day. Oakland scored 2 touchdowns, which was enough to push them to a 14-10 victory. Sometimes great teams just have to win when it's close, and this Raiders team was a great team. They were finally headed home with a record of 4-1. On October 20th, there was a love fest at the Oakland Alameda Coliseum. Just 3 days earlier, the Oakland A's had won their 3rd straight World Series title. If the Raiders felt any pressure to win another championship for the city of Oakland, they didn't seem to show it. Even though the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that had always played the Raiders tough, jumped out to a 14-3 lead, the autumn wind began to blow, and the Raiders fought back. Down 27-23 with just 1:36 left, Ken Stabler marched his team down the field. A Stabler pass to Mike Ciani moved the team to the 1-yard line, with just 13 seconds left. Then Charlie Smith ran right, and the Silver and Black won their 5th game in a row by a score of 30-27. Week 7 would mark the first regular season contest between the Raiders and the team just across the bay in San Francisco. At Candlestick Park, teams at opposite ends of the spectrum battled, but it was Marv Hubbard who did much of the battering, racking up 117 yards and a touchdown. Toward the end of the game, Harold Hart picked off a fumbled punt in midair and ran it back 60 yards for a score, capping the Raider conquest by a score of 35-24. The next week in Denver, the Raiders overcame a Rocky Mountain winter forecast, and they buried the hometown Broncos in the snow. Ken Stabler found Fred Biletnikoff twice for scores, making him the first player in Raiders history to score 60 touchdowns. Cliff Branch also was on the receiving end of 2 touchdown passes, on his way to 13 for the year. It was now 7 in a row for the Silver and Black. Final score, 28-17. Back in Oakland for the season's 9th week, the Raiders faced the Detroit Lions, who were riding a 4-game winning streak of their own. 2 interceptions by the Raiders, as well as rolling up over 500 yards in total offense, staked the hometown Silver and Black to a 21-3 halftime lead and went on to win the game 35-13. San Diego came to Oakland for Week 10, and Cliff Branch proved the familiar adage of speed kills as he scored on a 60-yard bomb from Ken Stabler. The defense pounded the Chargers, and Dr. Death Skip Thomas helped seal the deal with a late end-zone interception. Final score, Raiders 17, Chargers 10. When the Broncos came to Oakland the following week, they were meeting the first team in the entire NFL that had already sewn up a playoff spot. 7 times in 8 years, the Raiders had won the Western Division. But despite 2 Ken Stabler TD tosses to Fred Biletnikoff and a field goal by George Blanda, it wasn't quite enough for a victory. The Raider winning streak ended with a final score of 20-17. Unfortunately for the New England Patriots, they were the ones who had to pay for Oakland's loss to Denver the previous week. Jim Plunkett, who had beaten the Raiders in his very first start back in 1971, was pounded and harassed all day. The Patriots led 20-19 in the third quarter. Then, a barrage of Raider points resulted in a 41-26 pull-away victory for the team from the East Bay. Now sporting a 10-2 record, the Raiders traveled to Kansas City, and for the first time in a decade, this game would not determine a division champion. The Raiders had the division, and on this day, they managed to come away with a narrow 7-6 victory. Before the final league game against Dallas, which was played before a Saturday night crowd and a national television audience, Kenny Stabler was presented the 1974 Gorman Award as the player who best exemplified the pride and spirit of the Oakland Raiders. Stabler would also go on to win the MVP award that year. Fans saw Fred Biletnikoff lead the way while achieving his 8th consecutive season of 40 or more receptions. George Blanda came in late and threw a touchdown pass to Cliff Branch. It was the first pass he had thrown since 1972. It helped close the league season, resulting in a 27-23 triumph for the Raiders, as Blanda was named NFL Man of the Year. Now it was on to the playoffs. 2 more hurdles to get to the Super Bowl. The first obstacle was 2-time defending Super Bowl champ Miami. The Alameda Coliseum crowd was pumped. Black handkerchiefs were being waved throughout the stadium. Even John Madden couldn't recall the stands being any more electric. And then the Dolphins ran back the opening kickoff 89 yards for a touchdown. Just like that, the Raiders found themselves in a hole. But despite that and the fact that the Oakland air attack had a very slow start, the 7 points were the only ones put up in the first quarter, as the Raider defense kept things close. Charlie Smith caught a touchdown pass in the second quarter to tie things up. Then after yielding a field goal, Oakland came back and pushed ahead 14-10 on a Fred Biletnikoff touchdown reception. The Dolphins answered back with a touchdown pass of their own, but the extra point was missed. Still, 2-time champions clung to a 16-14 lead as the teams entered the fourth quarter, which they then extended to 19-14 with another field goal. Cliff Branch caught a pass from Ken Stabler at the Dolphin 30, but when he went down, he was untouched. He sprang up and bolted down the sideline for the final 30 yards, and Oakland reclaimed the lead 21-19, sending the crowd into a frenzy. But Shula's Dolphins would not give up so easily. Quarterback Bob Greasy drove them down the field, and they powered into the end zone with just over 2 minutes left in the contest, retaking the lead 26-21. Stabler then led the Raiders on one of the most memorable drives in team history. He went to Biletnikoff for an 18-yard pickup, then back to Biletnikoff for 20 more. With 40 seconds left, Stabler then hit Frank Pitts for a short gain. Pitts bobbled the ball at first, then controlled it in the shadow of the Miami end zone. Then, with just 35 seconds left, Stabler went back to pass. He was flushed out of the pocket, and just as he was being taken to the ground by Miami defensive end Vernon Herter, Stabler flipped the ball toward the end zone as he was falling forward. The pass was aimed at Clarence Davis, who was surrounded by 3 white-shirted Dolphins. Somehow, Davis managed to catch the ball amid the sea of hands, and Oakland scored a touchdown to retake the lead 28-26. Just 21 seconds remained, and Bob Greasy had one more chance to perhaps get the Dolphins in position for a field goal, which could snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But on first down, Greasy threw an interception to linebacker Phil Villapiano, who returned it to midfield. In jubilation, Villapiano ran the game ball over to John Madden, who had come out onto the field to join in the celebration. Madden took the ball, did an odd little dance, and thrust the ball into the air. He continued to hold the ball high when several seconds later he was carried off the field wearing an ear-to-ear grin. The Raiders won the game. The team would now host the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team it had already beaten once and had in fact shut out. The Raiders were convinced that they were headed to a Super Bowl. This time, however, despite having the home field advantage, the best record in football, and all the momentum in the world, The Raiders' quest for a world championship again came up just short. A George Blanda field goal had staked Oakland to an early lead. The Steelers got the ball and drove all the way down the field, but the defense stiffened. And when Pittsburgh's Roy Gerela missed a field goal, the Raiders clung to a 3-0 lead at the end of the first period. The Steelers then tied the game up in the second period, and the score remained tied until Oakland scored on a 38-yard pass play from Stabler to Cliff Branch. At the end of 3 periods, the Silver and Black held a 10-3 lead. But from there, the Steelers took command and ended up winning the game by a score of 24-13. It was perhaps the most disappointing loss in John Madden's coaching career. Everyone thought they had the team to do it, and they almost did. But almost carries no weight. And so, despite a final record of 13-3, it was back to the drawing board to figure out what went wrong and what the Raiders would need to do in order to finally hoist that coveted Lombardi trophy. And so, we move on to 1975. For this episode, I would like to thank Brian Burwell and his book Madden, also the now familiar resources of Mike Ciani and Christine Setting-Clark, Murray Olderman, Mark Grabowski, and NFL Films, as well as the 1974 Oakland Raiders Media Guide. I would also like to thank my producer, Heidi Stabber. You can catch me and Heidi together with Raider Homer on the Only Nation podcast as we cover the Raiders, both past and present. As for this Raider Roots podcast, you can go to my YouTube channel, T3 Sports Guy, and subscribe. Catch all the previous episodes and give me your feedback. In our next episode, we'll take a look at the year 1975. The Raiders once again find themselves on the doorstep of a world championship. Until then, this is T3 reminding you that passion always outlives fashion. And I want to wish you a bright silver moon shining in the dark black night. Take care, everybody, and go Raiders.